Sometimes, reality can be a lot more unsettling than anything we could ever dream up.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've been looking into this podcast you actually shared with me,
Oh, cool.
Shadows of Truth,
Yeah.
and it really does make you think twice about like how safe we really are.
Right.
It's real people sharing their actual experiences.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of stuff that'll send chills right down your spine.
Oh, for sure.
No fictional monsters here,
Yeah.
just the raw power of real life horror.
Yeah. I think what's so captivating about this podcast and just real life horror in general is that it really dismantles our sense of security.
Yeah.
As humans, we crave that predictability,
Right.
the feeling of being in control.
Yeah.
But then these stories, these real life horror stories, they remind us that the unexpected can really lurk around any corner.
It's like the rug is pulled out from under you. And in one of the first segments, the podcast host, Alex, he talks about this fragile sense of safety we all kind of carry around.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so fascinating because it really speaks to that very human need for order, for boundaries
Right.
between the known and the unknown.
Uh-huh.
And real life horror just shatters those boundaries.
Yeah. And when that happens,
Yeah.
we're left vulnerable.
Yeah.
And we're forced to confront the reality that, things can change in an instant.
Absolutely.
And that is such a powerful concept. And the podcast really, I think, drives it home with some truly unsettling listener stories.
Oh, for sure.
Have you come across any?
Yeah. One that really stuck with me was Sam's encounter in his new apartment.
Okay.
And it starts innocently enough, late at night, a knock at the door,
Right.
but it quickly spirals into something much, much darker.
Oh?
So there's this disheveled man at the door asking to be let in, claiming he's looking for a friend.
Yeah.
But Sam, wisely, he decides not to open the door.
Good idea.
And that's when things take a really frightening turn. Oh, no. What happened?
The man, he lunges at the door,
Oh, wow.
almost as if he's trying to, force his way in.
I can see why that story stuck with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that sudden shift in behavior, that's what makes it so effective, right? It
Mm.
plays on that very primal fear
Yeah.
of the unpredictable, the stranger who might not have good intentions.
Yeah.
It's that feeling of violation, the idea that our personal space, our sanctuary, could be breached.
Exactly. And even though Sam slams the door shut and calls the police,
Yeah.
the terror lingers.
Oh, I bet.
The police, they find no trace of the man.
Oh, wow.
But later, Sam discovers these scratches on his door frame,
Yeah.
as if someone was desperately trying to claw their way inside.
Yeah, that's creepy.
That detail, that just sends chills down my spine because it's
Wow.
like tangible evidence that something truly unsettling occurred.
It transforms the experience from a possible misinterpretation,
Right.
to something much more sinister.
Yeah.
The evidence supports Sam's fear.
So he's left in this constant state of hypervigilance.
Yeah,
And it makes you think about how vulnerable we really are, even in our own homes.
it really does. And Sam describes feeling constantly watched,
Yeah.
jumping at every sound, unable to shake that feeling that the man could return at any moment.
Oh, gosh.
And this, I think, speaks to the lasting psychological impact these kinds of encounters can have.
Right.
How they can just erode our sense of peace and security.
Absolutely. It's not just about the event itself. It's about the fear it instills,
Yeah.
the way it can warp our perception of safety.
Right.
We become hyper aware of potential threats,
Yeah.
even if they're statistically unlikely.
Right.
It's a survival mechanism, but it can also be incredibly debilitating.
It's true. And the fear, I think, is amplified even further when Sam discovers that a man matching the description of his visitor was wanted for a string of break-ins in the area, but was never caught.
Oh, wow.
And it adds a whole new layer of unease to the story.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we may never know the full extent of the danger we face.
Because the unknown is often more terrifying than the known.
Yeah.
And this unresolved mystery really underscores that point perfectly.
Yeah.
It leaves us with those unanswered questions,
Right.
wondering what might have happened if Sam had opened the door, fueling those anxieties,
Yeah.
and reminding us that we can never fully eliminate risk from our lives.
It really makes you think that the line between the ordinary and the extraordinary can be so thin.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we don't even realize we've crossed it until it's too late. It's like Sam's apartment, it became a haunted space for him, not by some, supernatural force,
Right.
but by the very real threat that just invaded his sense of security.
And that feeling, that haunting sense of vulnerability, can extend beyond our personal spaces.
Yay.
Think about places steeped in tragedy and sorrow, locations where history seems to refuse to stay buried. Those places, they can hold a very different kind of unsettling energy.
That's a great point. I'm actually curious to hear more about these haunted places.
Well, the podcast explores a couple of examples that I think really highlight this idea.
Oh, okay.
Let's start with the St. Augustine Lighthouse in Florida. It's known for its picturesque beauty, but it also carries a pretty heavy history.
Yeah.
Two young sisters tragically drowned there.
Oh, wow.
And ever since, visitors have reported a range of unsettling occurrences.
I can definitely see how a place like that with such a tragic past could hold on to that energy.
Yeah.
What kind of things are people experiencing there?
There have been reports of children's laughter
Oh, God.
echoing through the empty halls,
Wow.
footsteps creaking on the wooden stairs when no one's around,
Yeah.
shadowy figures just flitting in the peripheral vision.
Right.
Just imagine standing in that lighthouse, knowing its history,
Yeah.
and then catching a glimpse of something that you can't quite explain.
Oh, absolutely. That would send chills down my spine for sure. Makes you wonder if some places are just more susceptible to holding on to those echoes of the past,
Yeah.
especially places where, intense emotions like grief and despair were so prevalent.
It's a fascinating question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What makes a place haunted?
Right.
Is it the events themselves or the emotional residue left behind?
Yeah.
The podcast also explores the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia,
Okay.
a place with a completely different but equally chilling history.
The Eastern State Penitentiary, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Wasn't that a prison known for its pretty brutal conditions?
Yes, it was notorious for its system of solitary confinement,
Right.
designed to induce penitence through isolation.
Wow.
Now, it stands in ruins,
Yeah.
a shell of its former self.
Yeah.
But visitors still report feeling a sense of dread and unease within its walls.
That's so creepy.
Some claim to hear whispers coming from the empty cells.
Oh, gosh.
Others see shadowy figures lurking in the corridors.
Yeah.
And many just describe this pervasive feeling of being watched.
It's interesting how both these places, the lighthouse and the prison, are so different in their histories.
Yeah.
Yet they both evoke these similar feelings of fear and unease in people.
Right.
Do you think it's possible that certain places can hold on to a sort of collective energy? Like a residue of the emotions experienced there, regardless of the specific events that took place?
It's a compelling theory.
Yeah.
Think about the sheer volume of human suffering that took place within those prison walls.
Right.
Years of isolation, despair, and anguish.
It's hard to even imagine.
It's almost as if the building itself absorbed that negative energy.
Yeah.
And now it's somehow being projected back out, impacting those who are sensitive to it.
It's as if the walls themselves are whispering the stories of the past.
Yeah.
And just like Sam's experience in his apartment, these haunted places demonstrate how a sense of fear and unease can permeate a physical space, making us feel vulnerable and exposed.
Yeah.
It's not just about ghosts and apparitions, but about the way our environment can impact our psychological state.
Exactly.
Oh.
These stories tap into our primal fear of the unknown.
Yay!
The unseen forces that might be at play around us.
Yeah.
But the podcast doesn't just focus on haunted locations.
Okay.
It also dives back into personal encounters with the unsettling.
Right.
Like Mia's story of a late-night drive on a deserted road.
Okay.
Imagine the isolation, the darkness pressing in around you.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you see a figure standing by the roadside, just staring at you.
Just the thought of that makes me feel uneasy.
Yeah.
What happened next?
Well, as Mia gets closer, she realizes that something is terribly wrong.
Uh-huh.
The figure doesn't have a face.
Oh my gosh.
It's just a pale, featureless shape, almost like a mask.
That's terrifying. It's like something straight out of a nightmare.
Right.
I wonder if this taps into that uncanny valley phenomenon,
Mm-hmm.
where things that look almost human but not quite
Yeah.
trigger a deep sense of unease and revulsion in us.
That's a brilliant observation.
Yeah.
Our brains are wired to recognize and respond to human faces.
Right.
So when we encounter something that resembles a face but lacks those familiar features,
Yeah.
it creates this cognitive dissonance.
Right.
It's both familiar and deeply unsettling at the same time,
Right.
triggering a primal fear response.
And of course, to make matters worse, as Mia speeds away in terror, the figure reappears further down the road.
Oh, wow.
This isn't just a fleeting glimpse. It feels like something is intentionally pursuing her.
Yeah.
The repetition of the encounter amplifies the film, making it feel inescapable.
Absolutely. It's no
Wow.
longer just a strange sighting.
Right.
It becomes a haunting.
Yeah.
This relentless presence
Yeah.
that invades her sense of safety even after she escapes the immediate situation.
Right.
And what makes this story even more disturbing is that, like Sam's experience, it remains unexplained.
It makes you realize that even the most ordinary activities like driving home at night can become terrifying when we encounter something that defies our understanding of the world. These real-life horror stories, they don't offer easy explanations or comforting resolutions.
No.
They leave us grappling with the unknown,
Right.
forced to confront the possibility that there are things out there we may never fully comprehend.
And that, in a way, is the most terrifying aspect of real-life horror.
Mm.
That realization that our understanding of the world is limited
Yeah.
and that there might be forces at play that we simply can't grasp.
Right.
It challenges our sense of control, our belief that we can rationalize and explain away the unsettling events that happen around us.
So how do we cope with that feeling of vulnerability, that sense that we're not as in control as we thought we were?
Yeah.
What does the podcast have to say about the psychological impact of these kinds of experiences?
That's where the podcast really shines, I think.
Okay.
Diving deep into the psychological underpinnings of fear
Yeah.
and how these real-life horror stories affect us on a deeper level.
Right.
Remember Alex's concept of the fragile sense of safety?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that this fragility is deeply rooted in our need for predictability and control,
Mm-hmm.
which is something these stories inherently disrupt.
Yeah, it makes sense when you think about it.
Uh-huh.
We create routines, we build safe spaces, we try to make sense of the world around us. It's how we kind of manage anxiety,
Right.
feel secure.
Yeah.
But these stories, they remind us that chaos and the unexpected are always possibilities.
Exactly. They shatter that illusion of control that we so often cling to.
Right.
And it's not just about feeling vulnerable to, physical harm.
Yeah.
These stories also tap into those deeper existential fears.
Mm-hmm.
The fear of the unknown, the fear of losing control, and even the fear of death.
Yeah, it's like they're holding up a mirror to our own mortality,
Right.
reminding us that we're not invincible.
Yeah.
That bad things can and do happen,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes without reason or warning.
And yet, despite the fear and unease they evoke, we're drawn to these stories. We seek them out, we share them, we dissect them. Why do you think that is?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks it's about facing our fears in a controlled environment,
Okay.
almost like a mental rehearsal for the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
By listening to these stories, we explore those dark possibilities of life from a safe distance.
Right.
Maybe even, equipping ourselves to better handle those situations if they ever arise.
There's definitely an element of that.
Yeah,
It's like watching a scary movie.
right.
We know it's not real, but it still triggers those fight or flight responses.
Mm-hmm.
Allows us to experience fear and adrenaline in a safe way.
But it's more than just a thrill, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's also a sense of connection,
Right.
a feeling of shared vulnerability that
Mhm.
comes from knowing others have experienced these unsettling events.
For sure.
It normalizes those feelings of fear and uncertainty,
Yeah.
reminding us that we're not alone in our anxieties.
Absolutely. By
Uh-uh.
sharing these stories, we acknowledge that darker side of human experience.
Yeah.
The things that frighten us and make us question the world.
Right.
And in doing so, we create a sense of community, a shared understanding that could be incredibly comforting.
So maybe real-life horror isn't just about fear and vulnerability.
Right.
Maybe it's also about connection and resilience.
Yeah.
About finding strength and shared experiences and confronting the unknown together.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
These stories that evoke fear and uncertainty also have the power to bring us together,
Right.
to make us feel less alone in a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
They remind us that we're all in this together, facing the unknown, with a mix of trepidation and curiosity.
This has been a truly insightful deep dive. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of not just real-life horror,
Yeah.
but also the human condition itself.
Right.
Our need for safety and control, our fascination with the unknown, and our desire for connection in the face of fear. It's all there,
Yeah.
woven into these chilling tales.
And the beauty of real-life horror is that it leaves us with those lingering questions.
Yeah.
It prompts us to examine our own experiences and beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
It challenges us to confront our fears, both individual and collective,
Right.
and to find meaning in the shadows.
On that note, I have to ask,
Yeah.
have you ever had an experience that blurred the lines between reality and the unreal? Something that left you with a lingering sense of unease?
Mm.
A question mark hanging in the air.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about ghosts or monsters, but about those moments where you felt a prickle of fear, a sense that something wasn't quite right,
Right.
a glimpse into the unsettling mysteries that might lie just beneath the surface of our everyday lives.
It's a question worth pondering because whether we admit it or not,
Yeah.
we're all drawn to those mysteries of the world, the whispers of the unknown,
Hmm.
that beckon us to explore those darker corners of human experience.
Right.
And who knows, maybe in those shadows we find not only fear, but also a deeper understanding of ourselves and the fragile beauty of the world we inhabit.